Hi, I am Jose Maribi Santos. I'll be discussing brain-computer interface. I'll show you an example. What does BCI mean? BCI means brain-computer interface. A BCI or brain-computer interface is a collaboration in which a brain accepts and controls a mechanical device as a natural part of its representation of the body. BCI is a fast-growing, emergent technology in which researchers aim to build a direct channel between the human brain and the computer. Basically, if we can translate our thoughts and understand how our brain works and understand the signals, we can use those in communicating with the machine. Just try to imagine we can move something by just using our brains. History of BCI. It started when Hans Berger's discovery of the electrical activity of the human brain and the development of electroencephalography or EEG. Berger was able to identify oscillatory activity such as Berger's wave or alpha wave by analyzing EEG traces. Berger's first recording device was very rudimentary. He inserted silver wires under the scalp of his patients. These were later replaced by silver foils attached to the patient's head by rubber bandages. Berger's connected these sensors to Lippmann capillary electrometer, with disappointing results. However, more sophisticated measuring device such as Siemens double coil recording galvanometer, which displayed electric voltages as small as 1/10,000 of a volt, led to success. Berger analyzed the interrelation of alternation of his EEG waves diagrams with brain diseases. EEGs permitted completely new possibilities for the research of human brain activities. In the 1970s, research on BCI started at the University of California, which led to the emergence of the expression brain-computer interface. The focus of BCI research and development continues to be primarily on neuroprosthetics applications that can help restore damaged sight, hearing, and movement. The mid-1990s marked the appearance of the first neuroprosthetic devices for humans. A BCI recognizes specific energy or frequency patterns in the brain. BCI doesn't read the mind accurately, but detects the smallest of changes in the energy radiated by the brain when you think in a certain way. These are the types of brain-computer interface: invasive, semi-invasive, and non-invasive. So how does BCI works? The easiest and least invasive method is a set of electrodes, a device known as electroencephalography or EEG, attached to the scalp. The electrodes can read the brain signals. However, the scalp blocks a lot of electrical signals and it distorts what does get through. An electroencephalography is a useful test to help diagnose epilepsy. It records the electrical activity of the brain. To get higher resolution signal, scientists can implant electrodes directly on the gray matter of the brain itself or on the surface of the brain beneath the skull. But this kind of process need invasive surgery. Also, the device in the brain after long term tend to cause the formation of scar tissues. This scar tissue ultimately block the signals. The electrodes measure minute differences in the voltage between source. Then, the signals is then amplified and filtered. In the current BCI system, the signal is interpreted by a computer program. In the old BCI system, the signal is displayed through pens that automatically write patterns on a continuous sheet of paper. This is one example of brain-computer interface. This guy is trying to move the cursor in the computer screen by using his brain. There are wires that connect his brain and the computer. In the game that he is playing, his goal is to click the red squares. The red squares transfers every time he succeeds in the round. BCI and neuroprosthetics. Neuroprosthetics, also called neural prosthetics. It is related to neuroscience and biomedical engineering, concerned with developing neural prostheses. Prostheses, artificial device that replaces a missing body part. The difference between BCI and neuroprosthetics is mostly in how the terms are used. Neuroprosthetics typically connect the nervous system to a device, whereas BCIs usually connect the brain or the nervous system with a computer system. Practical neuroprosthetics can be linked to any part of the nervous system, for example, peripheral nerves, while the term BCI usually designates a narrower class of systems which interface with the central nervous system. BCI and neuroprosthetics both seek to achieve the same aim: restoring damaged sight, damaged hearing, damaged movement, ability to communicate, cognitive functions. Both use similar experimental methods and surgical techniques. That guy in the picture is one example. He had artificial vision system where it gives him the ability to see.
Hi, my name is Sir Patrick Malvar. I'll be discussing about different types of BCI, its advantages and disadvantages. Also, I'll be talking about animal BCI. So, enjoy!
Types of BCI. First is invasive BCIs. Invasive BCIs generally use electrodes or sensors that are implanted directly into the gray matter of the brain during neurosurgery. Since they live in the gray matter of the brain, invasive BCI produce the highest quality signals. Today, invasive BCI targets mainly the blind and paralyzed patients. One of the first scientists to produce a working brain interface to restore visual sight was William Dobell. The system included cameras mounted on glasses to send signals to the implant. Philip Kennedy and Roy Bakay of Emory University researchers in Atlanta were the first to implement the brain implant in a human, which helps to produce signals of high quality to simulate movement. The recent BrainGate neural interface system is another popular invasive BCI. Disadvantage of invasive BCI. Invasive BCI systems must be implanted surgically, which can introduce risks associated with any type of surgery. Implantation surgery and the presence of a foreign object within a human's body can create scar tissue in the area around the implantation. Scar tissue build can even cause the relatively stronger signal to weaken or be a loss altogether, thus negating the primary advantage of using invasive BCI. Additionally, there is the inherent risk that the implant will malfunction or simply wear out, and if the implant has to be removed for maintenance, additional surgery will be necessary. Another type of BCI is partially invasive BCI, or what we call semi-invasive BCI. These BCI use electrodes that are mainly implanted in the skull and exterior to the brain. Better resolution, good frequency range, and high quality signals are some of its advantages. Here, ECOG measures the electrical activity of the brain taken from beneath the skull. The partially invasive BCI electrodes are embedded in a thin plastic pad that is placed above the cortex beneath the dura mater. The dura mater is a thick membrane that surrounds the brain and spinal cord. Today, research on light reactive imaging BCI devices is taking place. These BCI devices generally involve implanting a laser inside the skull. Researchers of Carleton University in Canada believe that the same interface of light reactive imaging BCI could form the basis of a mind-controlled password system. Disadvantages of partially invasive BCI. Disadvantage is that These are still relatively large regions that may or may not be able to specifically separate and control three-dimensional movements. Because the electrodes are on the surface, they can move and lose specific registration. Another disadvantage is the apparent low rate of information transfer. Signaling still requires the detection of frequency range, which require averaging that slows detection and data transfer. The last type of PCI is non-invasive BCI. Non-invasive BCI has a minimum signal clarity, but it is considered to be the safest. This type of BCI has been found to be successful in giving a patient the ability to move muscle implants. In the non-invasive technique, medical scanning devices or sensors are mounted on caps or headbands, and they help read the brain signals. The signal clarity in non-invasive BCI is because the electrodes cannot be placed directly on the desired part of the brain. Disadvantages of non-invasive BCI. Non-invasive BCI basically rely on specific scalp EEG features. The main disadvantage of latter methods is that the scalp EEG signals represent the noisy spatio-temporal overlapping of activity rising from very diverse brain regions. Example given is a single scalp electrode picks up and mixes the temporal activity of myriads of neurons at a very different brain areas. Consequently, temporal and spectral features specific to different processes arising at different areas are intermixed with the same recording. Animal BCI. Animal BCI research started from 1970s and is still continuing to bring us great advancements in brain-computer interface technology. At first, the BCI research took place with animals like monkeys and rats. This is because monkeys have better abilities and skills, making them ideal test subjects for BCI work. Some of the animal BCI results were monkeys controlling computer sensors, commanding robotic arms, decoding neuronal firings to produce images seen by cats and other animals. Through animal BCI research work, the many scientists came up with astonishing results which tempted them to perform human BCI research. Several laboratories have managed to record signals from monkey and rat cerebral cortices in order to operate BCIs to carry out movement. Monkeys have navigated computer cursors on screen and commanded robotic arms to perform simple tasks simply by thinking about the task and without any motor output. Other research on cats has decoded visual signals. Studies that develop algorithms to reconstruct movements from motor cortex neurons, which control movement, date back to 1970s. Work by groups led by Schmid, Fetz, and Baker in the 1970s established that monkeys could quickly learn to voluntarily control the firing rate of individual neurons in the primary motor cortex by a closed-loop operant conditioning, a training method using punishment and rewards. In the 1980s, Apostolos Georgopoulos at Johns Hopkins University found a mathematical relationship between the electrical responses of a single motor cortex neurons in a rhesus macaque monkeys and the direction that the monkeys move their arms, which is based on a cosine function. He also found that the dispersed groups of neurons in different areas of the brain collectively controlled motor commands but was only able to record the firing of neurons in one area at a time because of technical limitations imposed by his equipment. There has been rapid development in BCI since the mid-90s. Several groups has been able to capture complex brain motor center signals using recordings from neural ensembles, group of neurons, and use of these control external devices, including research groups led by Richard Anderson, John Donoghue, Philip Kennedy, Miguel Nicolailis, and Andrew Schwartz. The biggest problem to brain-computer interface at present is a lack of sensor model that provides accurate, safe, and robust access to brain signals. It said that such a sensor will be developed for brain-computer interface within the next 20 years.
Hi, my name is Dunhill Vilardo, and I will be discussing to you the human brain computer interface, or the human BCI.
Invasive human BCI. Some targets of invasive BCI are repairing damaged eyesight and providing movement for people with paralysis. Invasive BCIs are implanted directly into the gray matter of the brain during neurosurgery. Because they lie in the gray matter, invasive devices produce the highest quality signals of BCI devices but are prone to scar tissue buildup, causing the signal to become weaker or even non-existent as the body reacts to a foreign object in the brain. In vision science, direct brain implants have been used to treat non-congenital blindness. One of the first scientists to produce a working brain interface to restore sight was private researcher William Dobell. The first sample of this prototype was implanted into Jerry, a man blinded in adulthood, in 1978. A single array BCI containing 68 electrodes was implanted onto Jerry's visual cortex and succeeded in producing phosphenes, the sensation of seeing light. The system included cameras mounted on glasses to send signals to the implant. Initially, the implant allowed Jerry to see shades of gray in a limited field of vision at a low frame rate. This also required him to be hooked up to a mainframe computer, but shrinking electronics and faster computers made his artificial eye more portable and now enable him to perform simple tasks unassisted. BCI focusing on motor neuroprosthetics aim to either restore movement in individuals with paralysis or provide devices to assist them such as interfaces with computers or robot arms. Researchers at Emory University in Atlanta, led by Philip Kennedy and Roy Bakay, was first to install a brain implant in a human that produced signals of high enough quality to stimulate movement. Their patient, Johnny Ray, suffered from locked-in syndrome after suffering a brainstem stroke. The patient was able to type in some words in a computer by controlling the computer cursor. Partially invasive human BCI. Partially invasive BCI devices are implanted inside the skull and the rest outside the brain rather than within the gray matter. They produce better resolution signals than non-invasive BCIs, where the bone tissue of the cranium deflects and deforms signals and have a lower risk of forming scar tissue in the brain than fully invasive BCIs. Electrocorticography, or ECOG, measures the electrical activity of the brain taken from beneath the skull in a similar way to a non-invasive electroencephalography, but the electrodes are embedded in a thin plastic pad that is placed above the cortex beneath the durameter. ECOG technologies were first trialed in humans in 2004 by Eric Leuthard and Daniel Moran from Washington University in St. Louis. In a later trial, the researchers enabled a teenage boy to play Space Invaders using his ECOG implant. This research indicates that control is rapid, requires minimal training, and may be an ideal trade-off with regards to signal fidelity and level of invasiveness. This feature profile and recent evidence of the high level of control with minimal training requirements shows potential for a real-world application for people with motor disabilities. Light reactive imaging BCI devices are still in the realm of theory. These would involve implanting a laser inside the skull. The laser would be trained on a single neuron and the neuron's reflectance measured by a separate sensor. When the neuron fires, the laser light pattern and wavelengths it reflects would change slightly. This would allow researchers to monitor single neurons but require less contact with tissue and reduce the risk of scar tissue buildup. Non-invasive human BCI. Neuroimaging interfaces were used to measure an aspect of brain function, often with a view to understanding the relationship between activity in certain brain areas and specific mental functions. Non-invasive BCIs have been used for a much broader variety of applications. Although they are easier to wear and do not require surgery, non-invasive BCIs have relatively poor spatial resolution and cannot effectively use higher frequency signals because the skull dampens signals and disperses the electromagnetic waves created by the neurons. Non-invasive BCIs also require some time and effort prior to each session of use, whereas invasive BCIs may be ready to use anytime after the initial surgery. Electroencephalography. Electroencephalography, or EEG, is the most studied non-invasive interface mainly due to its ease of use, fine temporal resolution, portability, and low setup cost. EEG is an electrophysiological monitoring method to record electrical activity of the brain. It is typically non-invasive with the electrodes placed along the scalp. EEG measures voltage fluctuations resulting from ionic current within the neurons of the brain. In clinical context, EEG refers to the recording of the brain's spontaneous electrical activity over a period of time as recorded from multiple electrodes placed on the scalp. Diagnostic applications generally focus on the spectral content of EEG, that is, the type of neural oscillations, or more commonly known as brainwaves, that can be observed in the EEG signals. In the early days of BCI research, paralyzed people were trained severely to self-regulate the slow cortical potentials in their EEG to such an extent that these signals could be used as a binary signal to control a computer cursor. Dry active electrodes were used in the early 90s. They played a great role in the BCI research involving the EEG. This device consisted of 4 sensors with integrated electronics to reduce noise by impedance matching. The advantages of such electrodes are no electrolyte used, no skin preparation, significantly reduced sensor size, and compatibility with EEG monitoring systems. Prosthesis and environment control. Non-invasive BCIs have also been applied to enable brain control of prosthetic upper and lower extremity devices. BCI-controlled functional electrical stimulation system restore upper and lower extremity movements in a person with motor disability. It works by wearing an electrode device which then transmits the brain signals to the prosthetic limb. Example of prosthesis is enabling a person with an amputated leg to walk. Examples of environment control are a paralyzed man moving around with a mind-controlled wheelchair, and home automation such that appliances at home are accessible by persons with motor disability through brainwaves.
Hi, I'm Alan Santillan, discussing the human-brain-computer interface.
These are other research for human BCI. Electronic neural networks have been deployed which shift the learning phase from the user to the computer. Experiments by scientists at the Fraunhofer Society in 2004 using neural networks led to noticeable improvements within 30 minutes of training. Experiments by Eduardo Miranda at the University of Plymouth in the UK has aimed to use EEG recordings of mental activity associated with music to allow the disabled to express themselves musically through an encephalophone. Researchers at the University of Twente in the Netherlands have been conducting research on using BCIs for non-disabled individuals, proposing that BCIs could improve error handling, task performance, and user experience, and that they could broaden the user spectrum. They particularly focused on BCI games, suggesting that BCI games could provide challenge, fantasy, and sociality to game players and could thus improve player experience. Ramaswamy Palaniapan has pioneered the development of BCI for use in biometrics to identify or authenticate a person. The method has also been suggested for use as PIN generation device, for example in ATM and internet banking transactions. The group, which is now at University of Wolverhampton, has previously developed analog cursor control using thoughts. The Emotive Company has been selling a commercial video game controller known as the Epoch since December 2009. This Epoch uses electromagnetic sensors. In 2014, Mind RDR, the first BCI for wearables, was released. Mind RDR uses the NeuroSky Mindwave mobile with Google Glass to allow users to
take the share photos on social media. The first BCI session with 100% accuracy based on 80 right-hand and 80 left-hand movement imaginations was recorded in 1998 by Christoph Guger. The BCI system used 27 electrodes overlaying the sensory motor cortex, weighted the electrodes with common spatial patterns, calculated the running variance, and used a linear discriminant analysis. Research is ongoing into military use of BCIs, and since the 1970s, DARPA has been funding research on this topic. The current focus of research is user-to-user communication through analysis of neural signals. The project Silent Talk aims to detect and analyze the word-specific neural signals using EEG, which occur before speech is vocalized, and to see if the patterns are generalizable. Magnetoencephalography, or MEG, and functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, have both been used successfully as non-invasive BCIs. In a widely reported experiment, fMRI allowed two users being scanned to play Pong in real time by altering their hemodynamic response, or brain blood flow through biofeedback techniques. fMRI measurements of hemodynamic responses in real time have also been used to control robot arms with a 7-second delay between thought and movement. In 2008, research development in the Advanced Telecommunication Research, or ATR, computational neuroscience laboratories in Kyoto, Japan allowed the scientists to reconstruct images directly from the brain and display them on a computer in black and white at a resolution of 10 by 10 pixels. The article announcing these achievements was the cover story of the journal Neuron of December 10, 2008. In 2011, researchers from UC Berkeley published a study reporting second-by-second reconstruction of videos watched by the study's subject from fMRI data. This was achieved by creating a statistical model relating visual patterns in videos shown to the subjects to the brain activity caused by watching the videos. This model was then used to look up the 101-second video segments in a database of 18 million seconds of random YouTube videos, whose visual patterns most clearly or closely matched the brain activity recorded when subjects watched a new video. This 101-second video extracts were then combined into a mashed up image that resembled the video being watched. Neurogaming. Currently, there is a new field of gaming called neurogaming, which uses non-invasive BCI in order to improve gameplay so that users can interact with the console without the use of a traditional controller. Some neurogaming software use a player's brainwaves, heart rate, expressions, pupil dilation, and even emotions to complete tasks or affect the mood of the game. For example, game developers of Emotive have created non-invasive BCI that will determine the mood of a player and adjust music or scenery accordingly. This new form of interaction between player and the software will enable a player to have a more realistic gaming experience because there will be less disconnect between a player and the console. Neurogaming will allow individuals to utilize their psychological state and have their reaction transfer to games in real time. However, since neurogaming is still in its first stages, not much is written about the new industry. The first Neurogaming conference was held in San Francisco on May 1st to 2nd, 2013. BCI control strategies in neurogaming has three parts: motor imagery, bio-neurofeedback for passive BCI designs, and visual evoked potential, or VEP. Let's start off with motor imagery. Motor imagery involves the imagination of the movements of various body parts resulting in sensory motor cortex activation, which modulates sensory motor oscillation in the EEG. This can be detected by the BCI to infer a user's intent. Motor imagery typically requires a number of sessions of training before acceptable control of the BCI is acquired. These training sessions may take a number of hours over several days before users can consistently employ the technique with acceptable levels of precision. Regardless of duration of the training session, users are unable to master the control scheme. This results in very slow pace of the gameplay. Bio or neurofeedback for passive BCI designs. Biofeedback is used to monitor a subject's mental relaxation. In some cases, biofeedbacks does not monitor electroencephalography or EEG, but instead bodily parameters such as electromyography or EMG, galvanic skin resistance or GSR, and heart rate variability or HRV. Many biofeedback systems are used to treat certain disorders such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or as well known as ADHD, sleep problems in children, teeth grinding, and chronic pain. EEG biofeedback systems typically monitor four different bands: theta 4 to 7 Hz, alpha 8 to 12 Hz, SMR 12 to 15 Hz, beta 15 to 18 Hz, and challenge the subject to control them. Passive BCI involves using BCI to enrich human-machine interaction with implicit information on the actual user's state. For example, simulation to detect when users intend to push brake during an emergency car stopping procedure. Game developers using passive BCIs need to acknowledge that through repetition of game levels, the user's cognitive state will change or adapt. Within the first play of a level, the user will react to things differently from during the second play. For example, the user will be less surprised at an event in the game if he or she is expecting it. Visual Evoked Potential or VEP. A VEP is an electrical potential recorded after a subject is presented with a type of visual stimuli. There are several types of VEPs. One of these is steady state visually evoked potential SSVEPs. Use potential generating by exciting the retina using visual stimuli modulated at certain frequencies. SSVEP stimuli are often formed and alternating checkboard patterns and at times simply use flashing images. The frequency of the phase reversal of the stimulus used can be clearly distinguished in the spectrum of an EEG. Well, this makes detection of SSVEP stimuli relatively easy. The other type of VEP used with application is the P300 potential. The P300 event-related potential is a positive peak in the EEG that occurs at roughly 300 ms after the appearance of a target stimulus or oddball stimuli. The P300 amplitude decreases as the target stimuli and the ignored stimuli grow more similar. The first application to use the P300 model was the P300 matrix. Within this system, a subject would choose a letter from a grid of 6 by 6 letters and numbers. The rows and columns of the grid flashed sequentially, and every time the selected choice letter was illuminated, the user's P300 was potentially elicited. Synthetic telepathy or silent communication. In a $6.3 million Army initiative to invent devices for telepathic communication, Jerwin's Koch, underwritten in a $2.2 million grant, found that it is possible to use ECOG signals to discriminate the vowels and consonants embedded in spoken and in imagined words. The results shed light on the distinct mechanisms associated with production of vowels and consonants, and could provide the basis for brain-based communication using imagined speeches. Research into synthetic telepathy using subvocalization is taking place at the University of California. Irvine led scientist Mike Dzumura. The first such communication took place in the 1960s, using EEG to create Morse code using brain alpha waves. Using EEG to communicate imagined speech is less accurate than the invasive method of placing an electrode between the skull and the brain. On February 27, 2013, the group of Miguel Nicolelis at Duke University and IINN-ELS successfully connected the brains of two rats with electronic interfaces that allowed them to directly share information in the first ever directed brain-to-brain interface. On the 3rd of September 2014, scientists reported that direct communication between human brains was possible over extended distances through internet transmission of EEG signals.
This is Mr. Ray Christian A. Custodio, your reporter for advantages and disadvantages of brain-computer interface. Hope you like. The advantages of brain-computer interface are applicable to various medical interventions, such as eye replacement, that transmit visual images to the mind of a blind person, allowing them to see. Next is the limb replacement, that allow paralyzed people to control prosthetic limbs with their mind. For a deaf person, transmit auditory data to the mind of a deaf person, allowing them to hear. And last, for a mute person, allow a mute person to have their thoughts displayed and spoken by a computer. The disadvantages of brain-computer interface works in limited setting because of number 1. Research is still in beginning stages. Next, the current technology is crude. Next, ethical issues may prevent its development. Next, electrodes placed inside the skull create scar tissue in the brain, which also include the greater risk of infection on the wrong side of the blood-brain barrier, risk of an immune system response, rejection or inflammation, risk of damage, or worse, death if the interface malfunctions. This is Ray Christian Custodio. Thank you for listening.
I'm Marvin Sunglao, and I will discuss ongoing BCI projects.
The Berlin Brain-Computer Interface aims to improve the detection and decoding of brain signals acquired through electroencephalogram or EEG. To this end, the research focuses on the new sensor technology, improved understanding of the brain, and the analysis of brain waves using modern machine learning methods. The technology at the Dunhill Square Society is based on methods to detect user-generated patterns in the user's EEG related to imagined movements. This research is being pursued in 3 streams: development of new brain interface technology, evaluation of BCI technology across different use populations and under varying conditions, and lastly, theoretical modeling. Dr. Gary Birch, Executive Director of the Dunhill Square Society and Adjunct Professor at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at UBC, has spent the last 15 years working with a team of researchers to develop such a direct brain-to-machine interface. The team is currently evaluating the usability of their current BCI and continuing to improve their technology. The long-term objective of the Brain Interface project is to create a multi-position brain-controlled switch that is activated by brain signals measured directly from the scalp of an individual. They believe that such a switch will allow an individual with a severe disability to have effective control of devices such as assistive appliances, computers, and neural prostheses, leading to a dramatically improved quality of life and reduced social costs. Researchers have built devices to interface with neural cells and entire neural networks in cultures outside animals, as well as furthering research on animal implantable devices. Experiments on cultured neural tissue have focused on building problem-solving networks, constructing basic computers, and manipulating robotic devices. Research into techniques for stimulating and recording from individual neurons grown on semiconductor chips is sometimes referred to as neuroelectronics or neurochip. Development for the first working neurochip was claimed by a Caltech team led by Jerome Pine and Michael Mayer in 1997. The Caltech chip had room for 16 neurons. In 2003, a team led by Theodore Berger at the University of Southern California started work on a neurochip designed to function as an artificial or prosthetic hippocampus. The neurochip was designed to function in rat brains and was intended as a prototype for the eventual development of higher brain prostheses. The hippocampus was chosen because it is thought to be the most ordered and structured part of the brain, and is the most studied area. Its function is to encode experiences for storage as long-term memories elsewhere in the brain. Thomas DeMars at the University of Florida used culture of 25,000 neurons taken from a rat's brain to fly an F-22 fighter jet aircraft simulator. After collection, the cortical neurons were cultured in a petri dish and rapidly began to reconnect themselves to form a living neural network. The cells were arranged over a grid of 60 electrodes and used to control the pitch and yaw functions of the simulator. The study's focus was on understanding how the human brain performs and learns computational tasks at a cellular level. Recently, a number of companies have scaled back medical-grade EEG technology, and in one case, NeuroSky rebuilt the technology from the ground up to create inexpensive BCIs. This technology has been built into toys and gaming devices. Some of these toys have been extremely commercially successful, like the NeuroSky and Mattel MindFlex. In 2006, Sony patented a neural interface system allowing radio waves to affect signals in the neural cortex. In 2007, NeuroSky released the first affordable consumer-based EEG along with the game NeuroBoy. This was also the first large-scale EEG device to use dry sensor technology. In 2007, OCZ Technology developed a device for use in video games relying primarily on electromyography. In 2008 again, the Final Fantasy developer Square Enix announced that it was partnering with NeuroSky to create the game Judica. In 2009, Mattel partnered with NeuroSky to release the MindFlex, a game that used an EEG to steer a ball through an obstacle course, by far the best-selling consumer-based EEG to date. In 2006, Uncle Milton Industries partnered with NeuroSky to release the Star Wars Force Trainer, a game designed to create the illusion of possessing the Force. In 2009 again, Emotive Systems released the Epoch, a 14-channel EEG that can read 4 mental states, 13 conscious states, facial expressions, and head movements. The Epoch is the first commercial BCI to use dry sensor technology, which can be dampened with a saline solution for a better connection. In November 2011, Time magazine selected Neko Mimi, produced by Neuroware, as one of the best inventions of the year. The company announced that it expected to launch a consumer version of the garment consisting of cast-like ears controlled by a brainwave reader produced by NeuroSky in spring 2012. In January 2013, Hasaka National University announced first master's program in virtual reality brain-computer interface application design. And in February 2014, They Shall Walk, a non-profit organization fixed on constructing exoskeletons dubbed life suits for paraplegics and quadriplegics, began a partnership with James W. Shakarji on the development of a wireless BCI.